All right. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome back to the Coach's Corner on the Fitter and Faster platform. I'm your host, as always, Mike Murray. Today, we have Todd Schmitz from the Colorado Stars out in Denver, Colorado. Coach, how are you today?
Excellent. Had morning practice this morning. I think it was 51 degrees and my athletes hopped in the water at 5:05. So yeah, life is good, but the sun is shining and it's supposed to be almost 80 today. And I'll take that in the first week of October any day.
You guys had a snowstorm, what, like 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, the 2 days after Labor Day, actually, we got down to like mid 30s both those days and got a little bit of snow. But the funny thing is after that, we haven't had anything below 50 and probably average closer to 80 in the last 3 weeks. And that's one of the best things about being in Colorado. We get, I'm not sure if it's 300 days of sunshine, but we get a lot of sunshine. So that's pretty nice.
Anytime I get to go to Colorado Springs, especially in the fall, right? That's the challenging month. You could wake up, it could be 40. And then by about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, walking between buildings on campus, it's like 80, 40
Yep.
degree change.
That's exactly. Very normal.
One of the things, Todd, that you and I have talked about this year is training outdoors. And we made the decision about 3 weeks ago to train outside through the winter because we're not going to get back in our indoor pool for the foreseeable future. But this is something that you had been planning for a while. And how's that transition going right now? Would you still be outside normally right now, or would you have already gone back in?
No, we would have started the season. Well, number one, we would have started the season about the second week in September. This year, we actually started back on, I think, August 16th. We just took a 2-week short break. Our facilities, our high school facilities that 4 or 5 teams kind of depend on around here are still not open. We got word last week that they may open sometime the end of October. But then even then, it's going to be, very, very strict limits and time in between groups to have somebody come in and clean and different things. And so all of a sudden, our already limited window of practice time from, 4 to 8 p.m. is going to be a lot less. And so, probably about the end of July, when we were mainly working out in outdoor facilities, of the 3 pools we had, 2 of them were neighborhood facilities. And I just started thinking, a lot of teams around us had pool time secured through the end of October because, like we said, it's pretty mild. But then not a lot of them had a plan after October. And my business sense and my finance degree, I just kept saying, like, yeah, but what's going to happen in November? And that's when I approached one of the pools we were working with, and I approached them with an opportunity for them, I thought, and presented it like that, and that, hey, I can add money to you, and we'll put in a new heater, and we'll make this a win-win so that, you guys don't have to close down the pool. You don't have to open in the spring. And, I actually went and sat in front of their board. And the best part about it is that I had every answer to every question they had when they threw it at me at the board meeting. And I sat there for about 40 minutes and presented who we were and who the Colorado Stars are and why we wanted to rent their facility for the winter. And that later that night, the manager texted me and he said, "Hey, great presentation, and the pool's yours." And so we've been in there. Last week was our last week at another facility. So yesterday was the first day we've had all groups there. We had some full pool, but it's an 8-lane, 25-meter pool. I see a lot of discussion and posts about a lot of people training short course meters because they're doing exactly what you and I are doing. We're thinking outside the box. And I never thought in all my business planning that I would have to plan for something like this. But then also, I don't think I would have ever guessed, like, oh yeah, you're going to lose both your main facilities for an unquestionable amount of time. We've been out of there since whatever, March 16th or whatever. And so, yeah, it's a crazy thing, but I think, just trying to network and open in as many doors. We approached probably a dozen different pools, and a lot of them just said, no, we're not interested. And I knew it was just a matter of knocking on the right door at the right time and letting them just even have the conversation, because I was confident that we're providing a good service to the community and just the neighborhoods around the facility. and they believed in that. So.
Yeah, for sure. And we took your idea and we ran with it. We did something similar where I went to a country club and we said, look, we know a lot of local country clubs over the last year have taken a hit. We're willing to pay you rent through the winter time. We're going to keep the water at 82 degrees. We'll buy all the chemicals. We'll take care of all that stuff. We got a 4-lane, 24.5 yard pool.
Yeah.
And listen, we're going with it. And then we do get indoor time in a local rec facility. So what we did, to kind of give them the ability to swim in meets and see how they're progressing, we're doing this thing that we call the Victor Grand Prix series. And we just picked some different events. And last Friday we did a timed mile. And we did a lot of open water swimming in the lake, the Finger Lakes this summer.
Yep.
We had 4 or 5 boys go lifetime best in the mile, 2 or 3 girls. And we put suits on, no blocks, off a push, lifetime best, kids getting under 17 minutes for the first time. It was great. It was a really good thing. So
let me ask you this, Mike, are you guys sanctioned in that?
We tried, but we're having a difficult time right now getting sanctions for it.
What? By who? Your LSC?
The LSC, yep. And we're trying to be equitable with other teams that might not have the same opportunity, which I think is good in some ways.
You know what? I agree, but you know what? Here's also, Mike, you're thinking outside the box. We're thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
My kids have already swam in 3 meets, including one at the end of July, right before we took a 2-week break. One over Memorial Day weekend that was a prelim final meet, outdoor long course. My 29-year-old sprinter went 23.2 in the morning and 22.81 at night in the 50 and then last weekend they raced, and they've all been sanctioned. And so, what I would say, your LSC, man, our LSC has been awesome, and we've had meets sanctioned all over the place. So if they need to talk to somebody, I would say they can reach out to Colorado Swimming and Jackie, and they can, But I think. And I know USA Swimming was doing that too. For a while, your times will only count in your LSC. Well, here's the reality: nobody can tell us when everybody's going to open back up. Nobody.
Right.
And so I think if we continue to hold everybody back, it's going to affect us as a whole in general. And so I think that's one of those things that I really told my staff. We have a meet schedule. And it looks nothing like a meet schedule, but like I've set up dual meets, and I've approached, right now I have a 25-meter pool with no blocks, like you were talking about. So it's not ideal to host a meet. So I approach these other teams that have pools, and I go, hey, in November, can we do a dual meet? Or and all these teams have come back, and so all of a sudden I was able to send out a meet schedule with 5 meets on it through January, and then because we don't know what's going to happen with our state championship. We just talked about that, and it's going to have, we usually have at our 14 and under state meet at the end of February, we usually have like 1,100 athletes. Well, there's not going to be any venue that's going to allow 1,100 athletes plus parents.
That's right.
So, you know what? Are we going to have 5 venues with 200 kids each? Can we even find 5 venues that allow 200 plus spectators or whatever it may be? And I think, just as coaches, and be proactive, get out there, start calling people. You know what? It doesn't hurt to ask, and if you don't know somebody's phone number, find their email or text somebody and say, hey, do you have so-and-so's phone number, and call them and say, hey, I know you guys have a facility that's open right now. Can we run a dual meet? And I think, number one, they can make money for their team. All right. Because guess what? Like you said, everybody's hurting right now. Every inter-squad meet that we run, every dual meet that we run, it's fully sanctioned. We charge fees just like every other meet, because guess what? It costs us money to run a meet, even if it's an inter-squad meet. I got to pay my staff. I got to pay, there's all these different things that go into it. And I think just be proactive as coaches. I talk to some coaches and they go, well, hey, when's Colorado Swimming going to come out with a meet schedule? And I look at them and I go, stop holding your breath. Because nobody's sanctioning a 1,000 kid invite anymore. All right. That's not going to happen right now. So be proactive and start thinking outside the box. We're in October already. If your kids haven't had some kind of racing opportunity, even like what you're doing, that's what's exciting. I don't know any kid that swims just to practice.
Right.
That's what masters do. They swim to stay in shape, and a lot of them don't want to compete at all. But that's not the way kids are. Kids are in swimming. Even some of the kids that you might not, that are at the end of the lane, or they still like competing. And I think that's one of those things with COVID, when nobody got to race from March until July, August, September, maybe not even raced until now. I think maybe the pandemic made them miss swimming, but now that if they're back in the water, and we don't add a lot of the things that they've had before, because there's already a lot of different things, and we can't have 7 in a lane, and we all can't stand on the wall at the same time. And yes, you're going to be standing 4 meters apart all the way down the lane for 4 or 5 kids, so it's going to look different. It's going to be different. So I think that as coaches, the more we can try and provide some of those opportunities. But you know what? It's like a coach from another team that we ran the dual meet with last weekend said to one of Eric Eikenberry, my associate head coach, she said, I don't know if I ever want to go back to 4 or 5 hour meet sessions. And it's true. I've listened to Brett's podcast, and I've listened to Brett's talk about it. I truly think that this pandemic really should make every single coach out there challenged to what their thinking was before this. I can tell you that my team as a whole, we're doing way less volume than we've ever done before. I've ran the team since 2008, the fall of 08, and there hasn't been one workout we've done 6,000 meters, not one. We go an hour and 45 minutes in the afternoon. We went an hour and a half this morning. I think this morning we did 5,000 meters with some pace. I ran 2 different sets at the end. My distance kids went 2 300s pole and then 3 400s. My other kids did 8 75s pole and then 3 sets of 3 100s. And so, you know what? And I told my kids that. I'm like, listen, if you haven't realized that we're not doing the same volume we had before, realize it. We're doing 10% plus less. And I go, that's the goal. And guess what? We swam fast. We've gone to meets all three of the meets that we've swam at have all been long course. And I'm talking 30% best times out of my senior group, my senior and high performance group. I told you my 29-year-old sprinter throwing up his second fastest 50 free ever. His fastest is only 3 100s faster at 2019 Nationals in Palo Alto. I mean, so we're doing something right. And I'm glad that I got the results, because I think as coaches, when we don't get results the way we think, we always really second guess ourselves. But when I started seeing these results, and even from our age group kids, we're not running 2-hour workouts anymore. Our 11 and overs are going an hour and 45 in the afternoon, maybe a 2-hour on a Saturday or Sunday. But my coaching staff agreed with me that, you know what, like, yeah, you're right. We don't need to go 2 hours. Why? Is the last 15 minutes really the most productive, or is that when their strokes are going to be the worst, and their focus, especially the younger kids, is their focus going to be less? All right. And I think the pandemic allowed us to do that, because our parents are going to be more apt to allow a little bit of change, and especially at the beginning when we didn't have as much pool time.
Right.
So then now it's the norm. You know what? And like I've told my staff, I don't see myself going back to 2-hour afternoons, unless, and because I like the results I'm getting from an hour and 45. I like the focus, and they're still leaving with a little bit of energy left in the tank, so they can still be kids.
Absolutely. And I love that you talk about that, Todd. So I had Mark Hesse on last week, and one of the things that he and I talked about was maybe we're finding out that we don't need to go 2-hour workouts. Maybe we're finding out that, right.
You know what? I know you post on your post, work works. It does. I'm not going to tell you it doesn't. All right. My kids still work. Like I said, my distance swimmers still went 3 400s this morning, short course meters, holding under 110s, so like we still do some work. But you're exactly right. And look at Paul Trineri. He was on Brett's podcast, and,
yes.
And you look at his results. He goes out and almost breaks the world record in the mile. And then 3 days later goes out and wins the 10K. Okay. So he's obviously fit. He's racing well, and he's throwing up world-class times that are better than his ever. And You know what? I don't know exactly what Greg's situation was before those races, but I'll guarantee you it wasn't 6 months up until those two races was not the same as the 6 months prior to that, just because the reality of the situation everybody's in.
And he's not beat up, right? He's able to have that great mile and then bounce right back.
It's exactly it, you know, and you know, I know there's Michael Andrew and USRPT. You know what? I don't think the pendulum needs to swing all that way. But I think we're realizing that instead of being on one of these ends, we can be more in the middle. But you're right, get better results from our athletes on a more consistent basis. You know, I think I've been to talks many times and listened to what we call old school coaches talk about your kids cannot taper more than twice a year. And when they get older and faster, they should not taper more than once a year. Okay. All right. You know, and I started falling into that with my athletes as we progressed. And then I think you get an athlete that maybe steps out of that norm and maybe takes a workout off that you didn't want to, but then all of a sudden they pop some really good results. And then you're like, oh, okay, maybe we don't need to hammer like we have. And I think as a coach, you got to be aware of those things. Watch what you're doing and watch what the results are. And I think as you see those things, then be like willing to look into that more instead of just going, that's nothing. No, it is something, you know, and I think it's definitely opened my eyes. That's for sure.
We're seeing a lot more athletes swimming fast whenever they want, right? I mean, that's the thing that's so cool about the last quad, I thought, is inside the last quad, all of a sudden you could swim fast whenever you wanted to. And I think that's part of the great thing about our Grand Prix series that we've had in USA Swimming the last several years. And I bring that up because it's a great segue into our main topic today, which is developing champions. So Todd, in 2013, I'm on the pool deck. I got three youngsters at the Minnesota Grand Prix. You're there, Missy's swimming. She's just really beginning to get that notoriety from her outstanding performances in London. She's a superstar. One of our athletes makes the top 8 in the 400 IM and is walking up to the ready room. 14 years old at the time. And Missy says good luck to her. Changed the entire trajectory. Just that little piece of Missy reaching out and showing this athlete that we're the same. You know, we've gone through the same thing. And that's the great thing also about those meets is our younger athletes who qualify get to be around those types of athletes like Missy. And so that changed the entire trajectory of her career. And she ultimately ended up making the national team. And that was a big part of it, that confidence at that meet. You've been a part of developing several athletes to get to a very high level. It would be impossible to say there's one characteristic that separates them from others, or maybe, you know, you have a different viewpoint on that. But what are some of those intangibles that you saw with Missy as a young age grouper as she was developing and some of the other athletes that you've coached?
Well, you know, a great question. And I you know, thanks for that story. I think, you know, one of those things that as we coach longer and longer, man, I remember hearing coaches say that they forgot more than they remember about swimming. And it's true. You know, you forget the stories but you know what? I mean, this morning I had 15 kids in the water at 5:05, and that wasn't always the way it has been. There was some morning workouts where it was Missy and I, you know, and then you know, after a year, then it was, you know, Missy and Jordan and Kelly and Caroline, and then there was a handful, and so then all of a sudden the buy-in started happening. But I like to say with Missy or really any of the world-class athletes that I've worked with, they're willing to make decisions that 99.99% of the people in the world would not make. And here's the best example that I can give of that. Junior year of Missy, we had when we have long course during the school year, we only have it on Sunday mornings, and typically it's once a month. And and I tell my athletes, like, listen, hey, there's not very many teams that get long course during the school year, and there's a reason why we've had 6 Olympians from 4 countries walk through our doors and train with us, because we offer those opportunities. But it's at 6 a.m. on Sunday morning, and so the calendar comes out, and she comes in the next day, and she's like, hey, coach, I got a problem. And I'm like, oh, okay, what's up? She's like, hey, so yeah, you saw that we have long course on whatever, May 3rd. And, my prom's on May 2nd. And I was like, okay. And she's like, so, what do you think? Do you think it'd be okay if I miss long course workout on May 3rd? And I was like, hey, Missy, that's not for me to decide. You need to decide. And and she looks at me, she goes, I hate when you do that. And I'm like, I know, but like, this is your ownership. At this point, she's 16 years old. This is probably right. Yeah, this is right before she turned 17, right before we rolled into London, and in the summer of 2012. And I said, and I can't make that decision. She went to prom. She stayed with her friends until, I believe, 2 a.m. Went home and took a 2-hour nap. Came, swam long course workout. Went and met her friends for breakfast, and then went home and did homework. I don't know if I've never had another athlete even ask me, but I don't even know if so that's the kind of, it's hard to tell people what that means until you tell them that story, because then people are like, what? Like, it's almost crazy to hear, but then you go, yeah, but realize that was a month and a half before she went to Omaha and made 7 events for the Olympic team as a 17-year-old. And then they go, oh, okay, yeah. Well, no, it shouldn't take that qualification just to mean something, all right? Because the reality is we all probably coach athletes like that, but you don't just hold them to like, oh, the Olympics or Olympic trials, okay? I think I listened to somebody a long time ago say, you know what, we can all have our own Olympic goals. It's not the Olympics, all right? And I think that's one of the best things about swimming too, is that your bar is your bar. My bar is my bar. And sure, I use my competitors and my teammates to help me, but at the end of the day, the time that I've gone is the time that I've gone. And I'm trying to go over that bar. And I think, but going back to what you were saying about the Grand Prix, I've said so many times, and that's why I really haven't liked the way that the Pro Series has shifted, and we've put way less numbers in it, because that meet in Minnesota, I'm pretty sure it was short course yards.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And I had a handful of athletes, and one of them was a gentleman by the name of John Matter that probably would have quit swimming, and he went on to swim at Georgia for 4 years and swam at NCAA's his senior year in the 50 breast. I went and watched him, and I said, John, if I would have told you as a 14-year-old you were going to finish your career with a 50 breast, he was like, oh, that's the best thing I've ever heard. And I was like, exactly. That's, so, but I said it so many times. You could go to the Pro Series of the Grand Prix, and you could hop in the lane with Michael Phelps and warm up. You're right. How cool is that for an up and coming swimmer? And you know what, Mike, I'm going to say this because I'm pretty sure that young lady you're talking about was your daughter, right?
Yeah.
Like, I remember it. You start telling me that, and you know what? I think you posted a picture, and you're like, "Hey, Todd, that's the first time we chatted." And so that's what this is. And you know what? Most athletes, though, elite athletes like Missy or any of the other ones you want to name off, they're aware of themselves and they're aware of what's going on. And you got to be a little self-centered sometimes when you're an elite level athlete, but that doesn't mean to be selfish, or it doesn't mean to be rude. And I think it's a fine line. I like to say you want to be confident, not cocky. All right, it's a line. All right, your confidence can walk right on that line, but then there's a time that we all of a sudden go to cocky, and people don't like cocky people.
Right.
People like, they like people that have some confidence. But you know what? And I like to say, Missy wasn't always the vocal leader. But you know what? She led by example, like getting in on time, being prepared, doing everything from beginning to end of warm up and warm down. Just all the little intangibles that as you watch from the outside as a coach, the kid that's there every day, 15 minutes early, just doing their thing, getting ready, getting in on time. And those are the things that, guess what? Even Missy had to retire, all right, sooner than she thought she was going to have to. But I think that's the best thing about what we do, Mike, is that we teach life lessons every single day, and they're disguised by swimming. But we do. And so I'm going to be 42 this month, and I still learn things from swimming, and I still learn the discipline and just all those things. And I wasn't an Olympic level swimmer. I swam Division II, and so I think those are the things that mean more. I mean, yeah, sure, I got this Olympic ring and I was on the staff in 2012, but that's not why I did this. I said I have a degree in finance. I can do the math real quick. The odds of me coaching an Olympian, a high school Olympian out of Colorado are astronomically ridiculous. I mean, I probably have better odds of being hit by an asteroid. And but that's not what drove me then, and it's not what drives me today. People love to ask me the question, hey, do you have the next Missy Franklin? And my answer is, listen, there's so many parts of that equation. Sure, do kids that I have right now have parts of the equation? Sure, they do, right? But there's so many parts of that equation that are, and there's also the X factor. And the X factor is different for every single person, I think, Mike. And that's one thing I've learned about dealing with elite level athletes and just watching elite level athletes compete, is that the X factor is a little different for everybody. And sure, it's a little similar, but at the end of the day, different things get different people going. And I think that's, as a coach too, you got to evolve, and you got to know your athletes. I think you build that relationship, and even just asking your kids when they walk in the door, like, hey, how was school today? Or hey, you mentioned the other day you had a big test. How'd that go? Just getting that connection outside of the pool, so that they know, number one, you're a person, and that you know that they're a person. But I think that connection is going to help you in the end.
There's so many great points that you made in there, Todd, and I want to touch on a couple of them. The first one, you mentioned Missy was a special type of person. There's a moment in the documentary Touch the Wall where a high school dual meet ends. And she's the first one walking around the pool picking up the trash. And that
was actually the high school state meet.
Oh, it was the state, wasn't even a dual meet. It was a state meet.
It was the high school state meet.
And she's walking around picking up trash, other teams. And, for me, when I look at Missy, and you would know better, but that X factor, I think a lot of her X factor was her personality, right? She was such a great teammate that I think that motivated her too. Is that accurate?
Without a doubt. I've had people ask me, number one, hey, was that part staged? No. I go, number one, I wasn't our high school coach, but I go, I'll guarantee you it wasn't staged. It wasn't. But number two, people see her in an interview or something, and they'll say, hey, is that the real Missy? And I go, 100% it is.
Yeah.
That's her, sincere and genuine, and she'll meet you for the second time, and man, she might not remember your name, but she's going to remember your daughter's name or whatever it may be. And, that's a people skill. I mean, she's still an endorser. She still has endorsements with multiple brands because she's a likable person, and it's not fake, and I think that's the best part about it, is that it is genuine. And when you meet her, you walk away and you just go, wow, like how is that? And I've had friends and family, especially in 2012, I had so many people come through Omaha, and man, she just was gracious every time, and just so nice and welcoming. And yeah, you don't always get that when people are at the highest level and they're trying to dial in their own competition, for sure.
Absolutely. And the other thing that you mentioned was, Missy made the tough decision to train that day of prom. A lot of us coaches would have said, listen, Missy, you got to make it happen. Like you got to get to practice. Our friend Chuck Batchelor, I know when Beisel was getting ready for prom, he made her go at 10,000 for time. How did you get that perspective to say, you know what, I'm going to give her the opportunity here to make that choice?
Well, obviously we talked about when that was. She's 16, almost 17 years old. We're well on the path. 2011. She went to Worlds. Was her first really big meet. 2010 was Pan Pacs. But 2011 Worlds, man, she went out and won the 200 back. She actually won a bronze medal from the outside lane in the 50 back. And man, I remember on deck watching that 50 back from the start end and watching her finish and not being able to see where she finished and looking up, and like I literally dropped to my knees because everybody that like I tell people, I go, Missy's first individual world championship medal was in the 50 back, and people go, no way, Missy's not a 50 backstroker. And I go, yeah, well, she was that year. And actually the funny thing is 3 weeks out from that, Natalie Coughlin decided not to swim the 50 back. So Missy was the other one who had an A time. So they called us up and said, hey, Missy, would you be interested in adding this to your schedule? And it was like either the day before or 2 days out from, I forget, I think a relay, maybe the 800 free relay. And I was like, why wouldn't we? Like, even if we have to just swim prelims and semis, like we're getting it in, it's going to be before the 200 back. And then she goes out and wins a bronze medal. So yeah, it's, looking at those things. So, being in 2012, I think she was far along. In 2008 is when she sat down with me, actually the fall of 2007, and told me, like, hey, I want to make Olympic trials next year. She was 12 years old. And I told her, I go, listen, you know what? That's a great goal. And I do think we can probably achieve that. But I go, you don't have to tell a lot of people that, because I knew at that point, at 12 years old, there's going to be a lot of naysayers. And I just felt like that probably wasn't going to be a good thing for her. And, the first meet of the year or the second meet of the year, it's in November and it's at Tops at the University of Denver. And she goes out and she throws down something crazy. And I believe it was the 50 free. It was the best time. And I don't even remember. I need to probably look it up, 23 something. And the meet finishes up that session and her mom comes down on deck, and DA knows, like, hey, you don't come on deck. Like Missy's mom knew. She comes down on deck and I'm kind of like, what's DA doing on deck? And she comes over and she goes, Todd, I think Missy made US Nationals, or it might have been US Open that. I don't remember. I don't think they changed it, but yeah. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's like, yeah, look. And she like shows me the time standards and I'm like, oh, yeah, she did. Well, then the next day, I want to say she goes out and makes the 100 free. And so then mom, sends me an email and says, hey, so are we changing? Are we going to US Nationals? I'm like, no, what? No, we're going to juniors the next week. Like, that's always been the plan. Like, no, and I think that was one of those deals that she threw it down, and it wasn't even on my radar because I wasn't in that place. I was just kind of, keeping it moving forward. And, but so that's why I gave her that ownership, is that she was along that process, and she had already, we'd already talked about her goals, and she had goals of making 7 events. At the end of the day in 2012, there's not very many people that can go into Olympic trials and swim almost exactly perfect every single race and make 7 events.
You're talking about almost 20 swims there, Todd, at Olympic trials over the course of that time. One day at Olympic trials feels like a week when you're in that position.
I will agree with that after 2016. I like to say that my 2 true Olympic trial experiences in 2012, it was like I was on a cloud, and man, I freaking everybody wanted to be my friend. You could do no wrong. And then I can tell you, 2016 was the hardest 8 days of my coaching career. And it's not because of anything besides the first time we went through it, I mean, it was like as scripted. I mean, and when I say as scripted, you're right. There was 20 some odd swims. We knew exactly, like the 100 back 2 free double. We knew exactly how many minutes she was going to have in between the heats and the finals, and like from the semifinal into the 100 back final, both at Olympic trials and the Olympics. Because guess what? It's on TV, ladies and gentlemen. So like, it's just like an NFL game. Like they got breaks in there, and they know to the 32nd when they're going to start a race or when they're going to parade people out. And so we had that information because that 2 free semifinal into the 100 back final, that's a beast, and it hasn't been successfully done very, very often. So.
And a lot easier at 17, 18 than it is at 2022.
Yes and no. I think it's number one, how you coach it.
Right.
Because think about it. No matter what athlete I've ever worked with, even my 29-year-old right now, if any of your athletes right now walked into practice and you said, hey, pre-meet warm up, all right, then we're going to go an effort. And then 15 minutes later, we're going to go another effort, and then you're warming down and you're done for the day. What would every one of your athletes do, Mike? They'd cheer.
They will fire up, baby.
Right? They'd cheer. And so like let's have that mentality. Like let's approach it that way. And it's like, but and I think as a coach and as a parent, really, it's how you package things, and how do you present it to them. And it's not that you want them to buy in. You're not selling anything, but like there was things like we went to the Austin Grand Prix or the Austin Elite meet, whatever, 3 weeks out from trials in 2012. And it was a small meet, and so I knew that from the competition pool to the warm down pool, there's going to be a little bit of a walk. And so literally, I was like, okay, Missy, here's I'm standing on the turn end at the University of Texas long course pool. And so she's starting on the flag end or and I go, okay, so Missy, you're going to finish. You got to walk around. You got to go up the 3 stairs, got to walk around the diving well. You got to come back, and then you got to walk around this end, and then you're going to see me. She's like, what? That's ridiculous. And I was like, I know. But I was like, I'm not sure how far the walk is at trials. So I was like, we're just going to do that now. Like, you're going to be tired, like, let's just do that. And it turned out like that was awesome because, so we did all this planning. Well, we go to the Olympics, and I'll tell you this, I'm glad I had it planned, and I'm glad that I talked to Missy about the plan multiple times because I've never been on an Olympic pool deck. I never coached an Olympic medalist before this. Missy won the 100 back on day number 2 or 3 of the meet. Okay, C-Bomb breaks the Olympic record in prelims. And I'm like, whoa. Hey, Missy keeps her head on the game. I watch Missy swim semifinals. C-Bomb swims the second heat of semifinals. They both finish. Missy walks up to me and I go, Emily's not going to go as fast as she did in prelims. And Missy looks at me and she goes, how do you know? And I go, I just watched her semifinal swim. I just don't think she is. I go, think about it. This morning she breaks the Olympic record. What does that mean? Yes, you broke the Olympic record. But guess what? It also means you got to be drug tested. So all of a sudden you add another 2 hours into the process of a recovery because it was prelims. We got to swim semis that night. And so all of a sudden we add a lot of things in there that man, I don't even think her coach, like, hey, you're going to pop something out so fast at prelims that we're going to have to be drug tested. And so I don't know why I said it, Mike, because, it could have burned me. But then I love watching the 100 back, and I love watching the last 30 meters of that race. They got that above water shot. And yep. I mean, it literally looks like Missy at about 20 meters out just goes into another gear.
Holding water and rotating through her stroke like you'd be working on perfect technique in practice, and that's what separated it, right?
Right. And so then we go to the 2 free 100 back, 2 free semifinal. Guess what? This is the race 14 minutes before the 100 back final. She swims and she makes 8th place by like 4 100ths. And I'm literally thinking to myself, like, are you kidding me? Well, if you go to that morning, the Olympics is run just like every other meet. You got 20 minutes to scratch or declare your intent to scratch at the finish of a race. Obviously, there's not a lot of scratching happening at the Olympics, but it does happen. So our team manager, Andy, comes up to me right after she finishes the 100 back, and she's just topped into the warm down pool. And he says, Todd, are you guys going to scratch the 2 free? And I'm like, what? He goes, hey, I'm just checking, you know, like we got 20 minutes. And I'm like, no, what do you mean? You know, and so he goes, okay, hey, you know, talk to Missy and I'll be over here. I'm not going to be on you. And well, then guess what? I just start second guessing everything in my mind. And you know, it's the 2 free into the 2 free semi, and then it's into the 100 back final. So the 100 back is going to be her first major final in the Olympics ever. And the 2 free semifinal is going to be less than 20 minutes before. I start thinking of all those facts, and I'm like, holy cow, I'm going to lose my cookies right here on the pool deck. And I'm not even kidding you. I started dry heaving, and I'm like trying to hold it, you know, and I'm like, holy cow. Well, you know, Missy comes in and it's like, hey, what else should I do for warm down here? And I was like, hey, so, you know, we just got to chat real quick. All right. So you unfortunately lost the draw today because you're going to be in the second heat of the semifinals instead of the first. So we're going to get three less minutes. So you're going to be in the second semifinal. You're going to roughly have, I think it's like 14 minutes in between races. They've already said that they're going to allow to have a masseuse come right outside the ready room so they can give you a little shakedown because you're not going to have enough time to walk down the hall to warm down. And so I go, so what do you think? And Missy just like looks at me and she goes, what do you mean? What do I think? Okay, sounds good. And puts her goggles on and pushes off. And I'm like, Andy, we're good. And you know, and I like to say, if the story goes differently, you know, if she doesn't, you know, she sneaks into the semifinal, she sneaks into the final out of the 2 free semifinal into 8th place. Like I said, I think if she doesn't make it into the final, I think that affects her performance in the 100 back, no doubt about it. And I also don't think that she probably wins the 100 back, you know, less than 20 minutes later. Luckily, that if it did work out the way it did, because I don't think I would be a swim coach today, and I'm not being sarcastic. I think that, you know, our national team director at that point talked to me kind of before Andy did, and he said, hey, Todd, do you think Missy can win the 2 free tomorrow? And I'm like, well, what are we talking about the 2 free right now for? And he goes, do you think Missy can win the 2 free tomorrow night? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And what he was getting at is, hey, Todd, let's drop the 2 free. Let's go win the 100 back. All right, let's get that gold medal. And guess what? I'm not faulting him for that. That's his job.
Right.
He's the national team director. We need to have the most medal count. And so, you know, he's looking at that. Well, so she wins the gold medal in the 100 back. The next night in the 200 free, she misses the bronze medal by 1/100th of a second. And that was heartbreaking. I mean, I can still remember her coming out of the media, you know, the media scrum as they come out of the out of the competition pool. And that was a hard one. It was hard on me and hard on her for sure. You know, the next night though, it was awesome because it worked out. Nathan Adrian actually went out and won the gold medal by 1/100th of a second the next night. And Missy and I were standing next to each other as Nathan won that race. And I turned to Missy and I go, hey, Nathan just got your 1/100th. And she goes, you're right. And she like just gets, you know, super excited because that's the type of personality she was.
I'm glad you brought that up, Todd, because I wanted to circle to that. And you had mentioned it earlier. And I've now used this quote on like 3 different coaches' corners. Jack Roach said something to me.
The Jackie Lama. I call him the Jackie Lama.
He's like Buddha. I know.
So the man.
So he said, my clarity in life is thought between spaces, and learning to be authentic is the greatest achievement that we can reach in our life. And you've talked about several moments now as we've been going through some of Missy's career where that authenticity was so important. And so, Jack just knows how to speak to these things that separate these types of people from everybody else.
Mike, what you said, and I like to say it maybe a little differently. I love the quote, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And man, that's so true. And it doesn't matter if I'm sitting down in a meeting with an HOA board to try and get their pool. As soon as they realize that this is my passion and this is what I do, then it's a lot easier for them to listen to the rest of the message. And I think that's the same thing with parents or athletes, like showing them that, man, you care about who they are and care about their kid. Their kid's just not a number. Like I like to know my athletes. And I think that's one of those things that as you get bigger and older and maybe it's harder, it's harder to connect with our 8 and unders or our 10 and unders. And now I love it because we're all going to be at the same facility, because when you're at different facilities, it's even harder.
Yeah.
But going back to that, I like to tell all my coaches, like, if you have an issue with a parent, go back to this quote and think about it before you have to talk to that parent about whatever their issue is. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And it doesn't matter what age you're coaching. You got, and it goes along with what Jack said and you just said, that being able to relate and be authentic is a skill that is lacking today. And I think that there's many reasons for it, but being able to be genuine and sincere with somebody, I think it's definitely a good life skill.
For sure. And then to circle back to the moment in 2016, I remember sitting at a breakfast table with you in the hospitality room. And
did I say something? I hope.
No, you were great. Yeah, we had a nice talk, but I could tell that you were a little relieved that you were still making the team. She was going to get some opportunities to have some swims. I think you were really proud that she was so resilient in the face of a lot of challenges that she was going through at the time. I know there was some back issues and some other things, and she had a tough year. But talk a little bit about managing your emotions throughout that meet when maybe you had some expectations, but you were being realistic. And then just being that support system for Missy, and you guys had been through it successfully together before. So you're managing all of that in the face of a ton of media, a ton of expectations. That was a challenge, and I could see it in you.
Yeah, my wife and I are going to be married for almost 3 years coming up on the 20th of this month, and she sees pictures of me pre 2016, and she goes, "Wow, you had a lot less gray hair." Or other people say that, and they go, "Yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt about that." And I like to say those 8 days or 10 days of the couple days before, and all the 8 days of trials in 2016 aged me a lot. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. And you're right. Like, I'm glad that you and I chatted and you got that from me, because I think that probably wasn't one of the first couple days, because I think my expectations, but not just mine, Missy's expectations for herself. I think after the first couple days, that's when I figured out, like, all right, it's going to be less about necessarily making the team, but it's also going to be about, like, hey, let's manage this. So no matter what happens, we're going out classy.
Yeah.
We're not going to go down without a fight, but we're going to go down so that if none of it works out the way we think it's gonna, then we're not one of those people that, man, they were, they started having a bad meet and they were just pissed or whatever it may be. You know what? And I can tell you that Lauren Landau, her dryland coach, and Michelle Landau, her PT, they were both there too. And I believe I told them on the second day of Olympic trials, when things weren't necessarily going the way that I thought they were going to go. I told them, I said, hey, the next week is going to be probably the most challenging week of our careers. And both of them kind of looked at me like, what do you mean? And the last night of the Olympic trials, we sat in the stands and watched them and watched the team be presented. And both of them turned to me and they said, wow, Todd, you were right. Now Lauren is the director of strength and performance for the Denver Broncos. So it's you're right, and that's one of the things I was most proud of. Was it hard for myself, Missy, everybody around us, and everybody around her? Without a doubt. But I'm glad that we were able to. When we went there, we were still going for it and still working for it. And even when things didn't work out necessarily the way we wanted, as a coach, you always got to be looking at how do I, like I said, how do you package it? Here's the funny thing is her time and I think in prelims of the 100 free or semifinals, I think of the 100 free was like only 14 100 slower than her time that she made the Olympic team in 2012. And I think it's hard to have that perspective because you're like, yeah, but I'm not even one of the top 8. I know, but just look at how much faster in the last 4 years it's gotten. And yeah, we both agree we should be faster, but like, just look at the big picture. Like it's not as bad as you think, because 4 years ago we were a quarter second faster and we thought it was awesome. And so I think sometimes you got to have that perspective on things. And here's the best thing. Before London, we had never put 4 girls up that could go 53 or better in a 400 free relay. Like that's the reality, ladies and gentlemen. Now we're putting up people that we're trying to have 2 girls go 52.
Yep.
And that's what we're going to probably need to compete with the Australians. So that's one of those things too, that like swimming's gotten faster at every level, including at the elite level. And I think with funding and maybe that may change now with the pandemic, but swimmers are sticking around longer. I think number one, because we're not doing as much volume. Number two, we're doing a lot more outside of the pool with strength and stretching and all those, and nutrition. So I think athletes are able to be in this longer. My 29-year-old Kent Olson Stavrakis, he swam at Mesa State University in Grand Junction, Colorado. Swam there for 4 years. He came to my program in the fall of 2015 and started working out with my pro group, Missy and a couple other athletes. And the second day of practice, he stopped me and he goes, Coach, I've never kicked this much in my life. I said, hey, you told me you want to make the 50 free for Olympic trials. I go, man, you got to have a big engine. I go, your engine's not your arms, it's your legs. And to this day, he's, just last Friday evening, he went 23-19 on I'm not even kidding you, off a block at an old Air Force Base pool. The block is no more than 16 inches big. All right. And he's making trials in that pool. And he's 29. He's going to be 30 before Olympic trials come around. And I think that's the cool thing about it. But as we keep people in the sport longer, we're going to keep getting faster because older swimmers are wise and they learn we don't got to grind this way and maybe we got to grind this way. And we tweak it in versus age group swimming. Sometimes it's who you're swimming for and do you gel with them and is it going to work out?
So many things there that are so important, Todd. One of the things that I want to conclude with here today, and this has been so awesome, a big topic in our profession right now, and it has a lot to do with developing champions in your team, is coaches' health and wellness. And what are some things that you've learned over the last quad or so, or things that you've started to incorporate into your life? And I know, being a young dad like you, we have a lot of push-pull factors every day. What are some things that you're doing to kind of promote health and wellness for you and your coaching staff?
I think number one, take a day off. Man, there's been, I think my family would say in 2012 and the years before that, and the years after it, they would say that I was married to my job, and I was married to my job. There's no doubt about it. I think now with an 8-month-old daughter in next week, and my other daughter is going to be 10. You change your perspective on things. And I think there's one thing that I did in February. We had a big meet. It was actually our senior championships. And in Colorado, it's not as big a deal because we're at altitude. So a lot of our senior programs go other places.
Mhm.
But we saw some fast swimming. That same weekend was my 9-year-old daughter's a dance recital, not a recital, a dance competition. Sorry, in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And you know what? Good for my wife Maxime that she just said, she goes, "Hey, we're going to this, and you're coming. We got a newborn baby. I can't do this by myself." You know, our baby was 2 weeks old at that point, and I didn't know that a pandemic was going to happen 3 weeks later, and she wasn't going to have any more dance competitions. Best thing I've ever done.
Right.
And you know what? That was hard. That was hard. You're coming to the end of the season, and but you know what? That's the reality. You know what? And I had, you know how many emails I got? Zero. Because I told my kids, I'm like, listen, it's not that I don't want to be there. It's not that I won't be following you, and you can text me and you can do all those things. But realize I need to drive down to Albuquerque, New Mexico to be with my family, and this is important for me. And I think that you know that's something that I probably wouldn't have done in the past. And I think even this year, there's a lot of programs around us that didn't take a break this summer because, well, we had such a long break. I had a parent say that to me. They said, "Well, you know, Todd, why are we going to take 2 weeks off the beginning of August? We had 4.5 months off or whatever it was." And I looked at them and I didn't even miss a beat. I go, "What time off was that?" Because I woke up every morning stressed about what the heck was happening with this team. And I go, "I'm sorry, that was not an enjoyable vacation.
No.
That wasn't a vacation in my mind at all." And sure, did I enjoy family time and did I get other things done? Yes, I'm not saying that I didn't. That wasn't a vacation. That wasn't me shutting off my brain. And I think so. We took 2 weeks off, and you know what? Maybe you know a couple people left the team because of that. But I can tell you that my coaches, when I told them that we were absolutely taking the first 2 weeks in August off, every one of my coaches was like, "Thank you."
Sure.
You know, we started back 3 weeks earlier than we normally would. Normally, my coaching staff would have anywhere from 4 to 5 weeks off. This year, they got 2 weeks off, and every one of them understood that. You know, now we're in the first week in October, and it's like, hey, whatever. It's another season. So
I think it's so important for coaches to do that. And we all say that, right? Like we all say, you know, I need to give my staff a day off, or I need to do, you know, we need a longer break. And then it ultimately, you know, something happens and it doesn't go down. And
yep,
Greg Troy told me one time that you should take 1 3-day weekend a month, you know, just to kind of unwind. I think, you know, another thing that's certainly a big part of my life in the last 4 years has been just exercise. You know, a lot of coaches, with the time that we're on the pool deck, you know, a lot of coaches are like, well, I don't want to swim, you know, or I'm too tired to run. But I
yeah.
think it's so important to get out there and do something, even if it's hiking or walking, or, you know, you're taking the kids out for, you know, your own kids outside. I don't think enough coaches are doing that, man. And
I think one of the best things, I bought my wife a new Apple 5 watch, I think it was, for her birthday in August. And so I got her old one. And I haven't worn a watch forever, but I can tell you what, and I've had people tell me this before, and I'm like, whatever, how the heck does this thing gets you going? Like
yeah,
my home screen is literally the one that shows your heart rate and your tracks, all your stuff. And so like, I catch myself all the time, even when I'm just coaching on deck, like, oh yeah, okay, I need to walk around a little more, you know,
yeah,
just so I'm moving more. And then the move goal and it's just those little motivation things that keep you going and make you more aware of it. And sure, it's all on my phone too, but guess what? It's a lot harder to look at that than it is to just hit my screen and go, oh, okay, I'm at 346 steps or 346 calories for today. All right, good. I'm doing pretty good.
right. Yeah. And I think, you know, we can get a lot of energy burn at practice too. If you're moving around a lot, getting excited about sets, the kids certainly appreciate that too.
Oh yeah, and I love the heart rate monitor. Like I've achieved my goal by like having a pace set that I'm like going up and down and cheering. And my wife's like, "What were you? Hey, no, I was coaching." Like
My exercise. Yeah.
yeah,
I think it's so important because, you know, you can get into that in the wintertime, you know, you can get into that February, March, April hospitality room every weekend thing.
yep.
And man, you're burnt at the end of that. And
Well, there's one point in Colorado swimming when it's normal, then I think there's like 5 weekends in a row when you include sectionals on the back end of March. Whenever it is in March, like 5 weekends in a row, we have swim meets. So you're exactly right. You're getting up early, you're going sitting down, even at a meet. It's not like you're walking around that much. It's
Yep.
easy to get stuck in those traps.
Well, Todd, thanks so much for your time. It's been awesome. I want to remind all our viewers that you can catch all the replays on the Fitter and Faster Coaches Corner website. And you can check this one out. It'll be out tomorrow. Todd, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. This has been awesome. Look forward to connecting with you again soon and seeing you on the pool deck, hopefully in the next year.
Yeah, no kidding. When we get back to normal. And hey, man, good luck outdoors. And I tell my staff, like, hey, if we can deal with less than 10% bad weather, 90% will be good. We're doing pretty darn good.
Well, I'll text you some pictures when we get our first. We'll see who gets. You'll probably get the first snow, but I'll get the first sub 10-degree day.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
All right, Todd, take care, man. Thanks for your time, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Mike.
Bye-bye.